Hey everybody, this is DM Mike, and this is the next campaign dive for Rise of Tiamat. We are on a side quest, if you will, so we're kind of off the grid when it comes to the book itself. We're actually at the base of a nondescript mountain in the Gray Peak Mountains in the Forgotten Realms, kind of far east of the High Forest. And this is where Lucius's father has been captured. Now, you can actually go and listen to this. Lucius has his own radio drama. It should be up on my radio dramas under the Rise of Tiamat playlist. And it's Lucius or the Paladin. That's his radio drama. And you can actually hear how that went down, his father being captured by the cult. And right now he's being imprisoned in this mountain. And that's where we left off last campaign diary, them heading towards the mountain and getting ready to climb it and try to find his father. Now, we started off the session with a quick cutscene called the Crimson Six or the Red Knights. That'll be up here in a little bit and have its own video. And then I tried a new experiment. Matter of fact, this night was filled with a lot of different experiments as I was going, as it kind of slowly unfolded for everybody. And a lot of these things I wasn't too sure if they were going to work, but they ended up being actually a lot of fun. First of all was this. I'll put the Forgotten Realms map up. As you can see, I've updated it. I've got fires everywhere. I've got dragons out here. I've got troop deployment everywhere. And what I decided to do was allow the players a little more agency in selecting troops and moving them throughout the realm, right? So I gave them a point cost. I gave them 225 points, right? And they could select certain units that cost a certain amount of points, anywhere from 100 to 5 points. 100 points being like a brigade, 5 points being like scouts that you could send out, right? And there was a certain availability of each type, right? Platoons or battalions or companies or squads, things like that. And it sounds really complicated, but it really, really wasn't. And I gave them a little bit of information. You can't quite see this. I'll put maybe an image up. But, I gave them hot zones and their point allocation and current army availability and a little bit of intel. And this actually turned out to be a lot of fun. It was just a wild, wacky experiment. And I don't really play a lot of those strategy games, but a lot of people felt like it was like a civilization game or something like that along those lines. And it turned out to be really, really good. They spent about 45 minutes, almost an hour, looking at this stuff and trying to figure out where they wanted to put people. And what's interesting was there was a lot of strategy involved. Not only just where suddenly the cult was, but also for their characters themselves, like their backstories. Like Lucius being from El Terrell really, really wanted a brigade or a company or something to go to El Terrell. That was really important to him. Storm has his backstory and the things that are going down right now with his clan, so he definitely wanted someone out there. And of course, there's a lot of armies moving closer and closer to Waterdeep, so that was a concern. So it really brought up all these kinds of things. So if want to engage the players a little bit more with the overall army and the threat of the cult across the Sword Coast, I would recommend doing this because this campaign, it needs to feel big, and I think that's where it falls apart. It doesn't quite feel big enough, if you ask me. It's just going from point A to point B to point C to point D, and I want things to feel a little bit bigger than that as if things are moving. That's one of the reasons why I have cutscenes doing all kinds of things like the burning of the Sword Coast and whatnot, trying to get this feeling of there's a lot going on besides just running around and trying to find masks, that kind of thing. So we started off with this, really, really good. It was really sketchy for me because I've never done this before, so I'm not even sure if this is, the best it could be. But you can find this kind of stuff online. I think if you Googled it, how to put it together. Apparently, Strongholds and Followers, a book that I have, actually has that point system, which I didn't even know. Like, I have the book and I didn't even look in it because I thought it was really just about, building a stronghold. So there was the answer. There was the thing I needed right there. So I started with that, and then I did a cutscene called Crimson Six or the Red Knights, and that highlighted what the Crimson Six were up to at that very moment when the players were at the base of the mountain. So we did that, and then the session started, and we played for about 5 hours that night. And we started off right there at the base of the mountain, and the players spent some time mending equipment and winter gear, and Thimbrius went scouting around, trying to figure if there was a path up the mountain or anything. It was raining and thundering. It wasn't really a good time to be climbing up the side of a mountain when that was going on. So they waited for that to kind of, dissipate before they started. Now, this was a night for Yithriel, one of our heroes here, to shine. I think she led the company throughout the entire thing. Not saying she was right up front during the dungeon crawl, but her powers, her abilities, her skill checks really came into their own, I think, in this session. I mean, it just, I don't know really what they would have done had she not been there. I mean, anybody can climb, right? I get that, but Yithriel had a way of finding the right paths to climb. She had like a pathfinding ability. I can't remember now what it was, but she could find safe routes while doing this. And so we started off with them climbing, and every few minutes, I just say, okay, let's do a skill check. They do it with advantage because Yithriel was guiding. And after they rolled, we'd roll a 100-sided die and multiply it by 10, and that's how many feet they went up, right? So we kept doing this, and and Yithriel's doing a great job, and just getting everybody up safely. And then eventually, after they hit about 500 feet, I made a roll chart. Maybe I'll throw it up here just so you have it, so you can quickly look at it again. It was hastily put together because it was Christmas week. It was just so much stuff going on. But anyway, eventually, as they were about halfway up the mountain, I decided to have 3 people, and it could be anybody at the table, 3 people roll a 1d12, and then, I tell them their results. And of course, everybody rolled low and got the worst results on the chart. And so that was pretty funny. Those actually 4 things happened. There was an avalanche, a lightning strike, and I'm sorry, 3. Avalanche, a lightning strike, and the path collapsed on them. So all kinds of stuff happened, and I had DC numbers and different checks and different things for that we resolved at the table. But that was like another hour of climbing and the most ridiculous things happening. But anyway, eventually they found a fissure, and they got into the fortress. Here is a tabletop simulator map here. As you can see, Tabletop Simulator can be used for 2D and 3D, and here I spent some time this week making 2 maps with the isometric map pack that you can find on Drive-Thru RPG for relatively cheap, and you could just build out these entire maps. So I built 2 separate maps for this. And this was the big experiment of the night. The third big experiment of the night. And this was an empty dungeon. There was nothing in it. No enemies. No creatures. Actually, there was only 3 creatures, but 5 creatures, but they were way at the end, right? So it was this completely empty dungeon. And they started off and they were going through and going through and going through and all these different places. And they finally, eventually got towards the end of this dungeon. And that's where 2 bone nagas and 3 gargoyles ambushed them. And they had their first encounter, but that was like 45 minutes to an hour later as they were going through. Now, that sounds a little silly, I know. It's like, how can an empty dungeon be any fun? Well, let me tell you, that was nerve-wracking for me. Now, after the game, I found out that people did enjoy it, and the dungeon actually created a lot of tension because they just kept waiting to run into the knights, but every little step they took, every corner they turned, there was nothing there. Now, what I did to make the empty dungeon at least a little more interactive and to give it feeling was I had all these notes prepared on a Microsoft Word document, and I cut them out, folded them, and as they were going through certain rooms, certain hallways, I just pass out things. And they would say things like, you see a blood stain on the ceiling, that something was pulled through a small crack. You don't know what it is or where it was. It's not there anymore, but there it is. Or they would go through and they would hear the clattering of something way off in the distance, something skittering and moving, and things of that nature. And I was just passing these notes every once in a while through the dungeon to make it feel a little real, a little more intense, as if things were moving, but nothing was happening, like you're just waiting to be ambushed. And another reason why the dungeon was empty was, to me, this is a secret. The cult wouldn't put anything in there. Like, I just felt like there's not going to be any traps. There's not going to be a bunch of guards just hanging around because it needs to be secret. Even if a stranger comes into this area, maybe happens to find this old sunken fortress, well, he's not going to suspect anything. He just found something that's kind of cool. Maybe he survives it, and then he leaves. So there was nothing in there, right? They didn't want to give anything away. But I felt like the bone nagas made sense to me, and the gargoyles, who may have been old guardians that actually lived in that fortress when it was above the mountain instead of after it sunk in. So that made sense to me. And I think you needed at least one encounter, right? But the whole way through, Yithriel again shined throughout the whole thing. I borrowed an idea from Conan the Barbarian, a lot of the short stories, which was the Black Lotus. This plant is well known in that literature. and it's very deadly. It can be poisonous. It could put you to sleep. It could make you have wild dreams and visions. And so that's what I had in there. And she ended up at one moment, a lot of the Black Lotus vines, they're like huge jungle vines, were blocking a doorway. And she cast Speak with Plant, I think is what it is, or Speak with Vegetation or something. I don't know. Vegan speech. And that was cool. When's the last time that kind of spell was cast, right? I didn't know she had that. So that was just like another thing that like, wow, that really solved the problem. So, and there's other things like I passed a note that said, you smell wormwood. Now the elves are immune to it, but wormwood now is a poisonous thing. If the players are around it for too long, for like a few hours, it'll start to take effect. There'll be paralysis and different things. So again, that was Yithriel, and she made everybody aware of it. So everybody had to cover up, and protect themselves. So it was just, what can I say? It was Yithriel's night to shine this night as they were going through all of this. So they attack the Bone Nagas and the gargoyles, and then they get to a room. All right, and this room is empty except for one statue. Now let me back up for a second, because there was a moment I forgot. When they were down at the base of the mountain, the witch's fire erupted. They had a campfire going, and the witch's fire is just mages, witches and hags and different things can speak through flame, basically, like a bonfire or a campfire or something like that. They can all speak through it. Well, the shaman from chapter 2 got in touch with Lucius and returned his father's jewel. So some deal had been made between that shaman and the hag. No one knows what it is, but a deal was made. And so she returned the jewel to him. And she also told him a little secret. She said, sometimes stone... oh gosh, what did I... Oh gosh. I knew I was going to forget it. I have it here. I'm going to get it. It's on my outline. I have it. I said, sometimes stone can reveal the truth. Look for the key that moves. And basically what happened is they get to this room, and there's a huge statue there. I have descriptors for it that I put out and I gave everybody. And they're looking at it. They don't know what to do. It's just another empty room, as all the rooms have been. But they start to piece together. They're looking for like clues, like, okay, there's got to be something here, right? They're trying to move it, but it's like 4 tons of rock. It's not going to go anywhere. And basically what happened was Lucius recalled the information. And all throughout this adventure, Yithriel has taken Pebble, her little NPC, and brought her to shops and whatnot. I said, can you tell me what this is? Like why this fae is here and all this kind of stuff. And a lot of the hags or shop owners and apothecaries and people that were wise in magic and whatnot said, look, he's a key. We don't know what he opens, but he is a key. Well, 2-3 months later, here we are in this dungeon. And what happens is Pebble, she holds up Pebble and like Pebble's made of stone, like he's made of rock pretty much. He's a little fey about this big. And his stomach opened up, like he ended up being this circle, this hole in his belly. And when they looked through it, they could see through the statue and see the hidden door behind it. All right, and it brought the statue to life. The statue moved out of the way, and there suddenly was the door to the next section of the dungeon. And that was one of Pebble's things. Pebble's things. That's one of his gifts. He is a key. He has a way of opening up astral portals and different things, and you never know what he's going to be able to do. And this came from a little bit of research. I had come across something called the Hagstone, and the Hagstones are real things, lore, mythology, but real stones you can find that have holes in them. And these stones, the myth behind them is that you can see fairies, you could see other things, like you could see through illusions, you could see all kinds of stuff. Like it's almost like little crystals people wear, try to get the energy from and different things. It's kind of like a novelty thing. But it actually has some real lore and history behind it. And that inspired that whole thing, just that little bit of information that I came across. So anyway, they open the door, they go in, and this is where they actually enter the Foundry. And as you can see here on the map, it's huge. There's lava, there's water, there's tubes everywhere. And they went around exploring. This was another area that had like black ivory everywhere. They could see the reflection in the floor of themselves. And it was built almost like a cathedral on the inside. It was well lit, there was flames. And as they were going through, as you can see here, there was the blacksmith area, the main forge, and there was also like a supply area. And the forge area, as they looked up, they could see about 60 to 100 automatons who were kind of lined up around the ceiling. And they guessed rightly. A lot of these creatures, these robots, were there to create weaponry. The cult had designed them to produce massive amounts of weaponry very, very fast. So they found those automatons in the forge, and they found the automatons also in the supply area. And because Lucius is a blacksmith, he could tell, because of all the metals and the ingredients and the chemicals that were on display, that they were trying to create something. They were trying to create a lot of weaponry very, very fast. Well, they ended up finding it. As you can see here, the 2 rooms here in the Tabletop Simulator map are, I can only put so many there, right? But really there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of rows of all these weapons that have been already crafted and made and ready to go. They could completely outfit a battalion if they wanted to, several battalions if they really needed to. So this forge has been very, very busy. So they discover all this, they go around the corner, and they come finally to the last room, which is where obviously the Crimson Six are. They open it up, and now we have the next Tabletop Simulator map. I feel like I didn't say that right. Tabletop Simulator map. This one again is another custom set piece I made. A lot of my illustrations with the flooring and the lava and the pillars and different things and the pipe work. And I ended the night right here. They walked in, and I played a musical cue from Record of Lotus War, Disc 1. I think it was track number 9. I can't remember now. I've been waiting to use this music. I love this music. And all the paladins misty stepped down to them and surround them. All the red knights, the Crimson Six. And off in the corner, they saw somebody who was crucified next to a metal throne. And I'm sure Lucius thought, that's my father. But they were completely wrong. It was actually Mortimer, who disappeared after Horde of the Dragon Queen. If you've been watching all this time, he was one of the original heroes in Horde of the Dragon Queen. And Alban had wiped out his company. Well, Mortimer went looking for him and actually ended up finding him, but was caught and unsuccessful in acting out his revenge. So they knew sooner or later the heroes might come for him. That was one caveat for them. They wanted some insurance policy, so they kept Mortimer alive. It was kind of a shock to the players, like, Mortimer? I think they were really expecting Lucius's father. His father's there, though. His father is there, but that was the surprise. So everybody was surrounded in this area, and that's where I stopped it, because you got to do that, right? You got to do that as a DM. You got to have a cliffhanger. You got to leave them wanting more, and that was the whole idea behind that. But anyway, guys, I'm going to stop it here. That's all I got for you. As you can see, a lot of experiments, a lot of new Tabletop Simulator maps, both 2D and 3D that can be used. It's such a versatile program. And, it was a night of DC checking and skills, and really Yithriel just doing a wonderful job in leading everybody through the mountains, through these paths, and talking with plants and picking up on poison, and really just kind of, leading the charge last Friday. So that was kind of cool. All right, guys, we play again January 10th, but until then, there'll be other videos and, of course, other cutscenes, things I'll be putting out until that time. All right, guys, that's it. I'll see you in the next one.